And not all water filters filter out fluoride. The refrigerator water filter, that usually doesn't filter any fluoride. And this is because, hi friends, do you filter your drinking water? Robert F. Kennedy Jr. claims that fluoride is connected to arthritis, bone fractures, cancers, and IQ loss, amongst a whole host of other illnesses. And he wants to eliminate fluoride in our tap water. There's a lot of controversy about this because America's been fluorinating tap water for over 75 years. So I was curious and I went to Switzerland to test their tap water to see if they put fluoride, because Switzerland is renowned for offering some of the highest quality water in the world. And so since our bodies are mostly made out of water, at least 60%, it's really important to get that water quality right. And the Swiss, they're a top 5 longevity country, whereas we're ranked next to 50. But before I show you those results, it's important that we're all on the same page so that you can understand what fluoride is and what's a big deal. And if you want to filter your fluoride, I'll talk about some water filters later. Now, for starters, the National Toxicology Program found that higher levels of fluoride exposure in children of more than 1.5 milligrams per liter are associated with a lower IQ in children. And that's really alarming. And depending on the age of the child, some children in general require roughly 1.5 liters or less a day. Now, this is a national toxicology program, not some private institution that made that declaration on their website. And to be clear, the National Toxicology Program is under the direction of the Assistant Secretary of Health and the Department of Health and Human Services. But not all government institutions agree with one another. The CDC disagrees with the National Toxicology Program position and states that there is no association between water fluorination and any other unwanted health effects except for dental fluorosis, which I'll explain later. Now, a few private institutions like the American Dental Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Academy of Family Physicians and the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force, they all believe that it's beneficial to fluorinate our tap water and that fluorination is safe for children and adults and it's beneficial for dental health. Now, I'm going to spare you my opinion and just get to the facts. And I'm going to give you some options on filtering that fluoride out if you want to do it regardless of what our government decides to do. But in order to make a decision on that, you have to understand fluoride, the history of fluoride, and why we even have it in our tap. Now, first of all, just like fortifying vitamins and minerals in your processed grains and cereals, America has been fluorinating tap water since 1945 in the goals to improve the health of all Americans. Now in life, there's always trade-offs. And when we concentrate any molecule, whether that is sugar, salt, fat, fluoride, there's always going to be some downstream effects. Now, fluoride was added to tap water because fluoride reduces cavities and improves oral health. Now, dental cavities were rampant in America before fluoride was added to drinking water. In fact, it is still the most common chronic disease in the entire world. And today, 9 out of 10 Americans still have cavities. I have cavities despite drinking that tap water as a child. But are we confusing the symptom, cavities, versus the root cause of health problems that lead to cavities as well as other health problems? This is kind of like the diabetes debate. People confuse symptoms of high blood sugar with the cause of diabetes. They think it's high sugar, but in fact, it's been proven to be saturated fat. But it's not just any saturated fat. It's a saturated fat that infiltrates the muscle, pancreas, and liver. American medical insurance companies advise people to get routine preventive dental care, stating that it could save people 12.25% in medical costs. And if it was that simple, I absolutely think it's worth going for routine dental cleaning, especially if you're uninsured. Regardless of insurance, it's important to get routine visits with your dentist. But if you want to save money, it's especially important to do that dental cleaning. People often put off dental care because they think it's just cosmetic. But in reality, it's not. However, dental care isn't just going to the dentist every 6 months. Because if you actually took care of your teeth properly every single day, you probably would put the dentist out of a job. But if you did have severe dental disease or gum disease, they can help you improve those symptoms much faster. And it's important to do that because poor oral hygiene, which includes cavities, periodontal disease, leads to other health problems. There's actually a strong connection between the health of your mouth with the episodes of heart attacks, strokes, and other infections that you get elsewhere in the body. Now, if you survive these catastrophic events, having an active dental condition could also delay a life-saving procedure like a kidney transplant. There's over 500,000 people with kidney failure, and they all require dialysis, which means that they have to go in and sit in the chair several hours a day to get their blood cleaned out. Over 100,000 people are waiting for a kidney transplant. But if you have poor oral hygiene, your infectious disease doctor won't clear you for that kidney transplant. Having poor oral hygiene will basically speed up the rate at which you lose your teeth, which will make it very difficult to eat food. And when you don't eat food, you miss nutrients that causes a whole host of other problems. But if you keep your teeth, you are more susceptible to growing different types of organisms in your mouth. Agrigotobacter actinomyceticomycins bacteria, that's a mouthful, is suspected to cause an autoimmune disease called rheumatoid arthritis. In addition, people with pathogenic bacteria like E. coli or Klebsiella or strep species in the mouth are more susceptible to getting aspiration pneumonia, especially when their immune defenses are low. Well, everybody thinks they know what causes cavities. And if you guess sugar, then you would be wrong. Sugar itself does not cause cavities. However, sugar feeds bacteria that then ferments that sugar into acid. And the acid is what causes cavities. And it's really not just simple sugars like sucrose or table sugar, but starches like bread and rice, especially refined, leads to more cavities because it leads to more acid-producing bacteria. So cavities, in reality, are a symptom of dietary choices. And it's really the dietary choices that not only breed certain microbes, but it also leads to heart attacks, strokes, chronic metabolic diseases, and infectious diseases. So do you see how people are confusing the symptoms of cavities versus the cause of cavities and other metabolic health consequences? Because if you only address cavities, you have not improved people's overall health. And this is what is happening in our society right now. There's different ways to just temporarily put a Band-Aid on the problem. And fluoride is a temporary Band-Aid. It only addresses cavities. But if we still do the same things that lead to those cavities, we will still have chronic metabolic diseases. And many people haven't figured out that the root cause of all our metabolic diseases is our diet. And in medicine, we try to Band-Aid different areas, and yet we take our eye off the real root cause, which is our food quality. And this is perfect for processed food companies because they will continue to make their trillions of dollars producing processed foods that are nutritionally deficient that promote cavities, while the rest of us debate over whether or not we should have a little fluoride in our water. Now, if you want to regulate some chemicals that negatively affect human health, why don't you look into the FDA registry of the 10,000 different food additives and start there? I think it would be a lot less controversial than fluoride. But I do understand why many people want to continue to add fluoride to drinking water, because we want to help people make their teeth stronger and more resistant to decay. And some people try things on their own, like mouthwashes, to reduce the bacteria to improve their oral health. But you may want to consider using mouthwashes, especially ones with alcohol, because you're killing the bad bacteria as well as the good bacteria. Your mouth has billions of microbes, roughly 700 different species of bacteria alone. And if you have healthy teeth, gums, and tongue, then your microbes are doing a good job helping you fight diseases and preventing the pathogens from taking over. Now, your oral microbiome actually helps you to regulate bodily functions. But if you pick up the wrong bacteria and feed it, well, they can actually be very harmful to your teeth and cause systemic infections. Some bacteria like Streptococcus mutans and Lactobacillus are acid producing. Lactobacillus is the same stuff that you're finding in your dairy. And this is another reason why drinking dairy causes cavities. Now, your teeth is made out of enamel, dentin, and pulp. And when you eat foods that are rich in refined carbohydrates like bread, cookies, sugar, cake. Some of that leftover food is fed to streptococcal mutans and lactobacillus that are living near your teeth. And these guys thrive on those foods, and they convert the starches and the sugars into acid. Do you remember putting a bib on your kids? I used to have a bib with a pocket. As my children ate, all the food would drop into the pocket. Kids have slippery fingers, and a ton of food always collects in those bib pockets. And your teeth are like those bib pockets. In between them, food gets stuck. And those foods, they help bacteria get snacks in between your meals. And food is the basis of how plaque starts. And the more carbohydrates you eat, especially refined, the faster the acid will be generated. And usually you have saliva to wash away the bacteria and to remodel the teeth as it gets damaged. But at some point, you won't be able to make enough saliva to keep up with the destruction. And this is why it's important to brush and floss your teeth in between meals. Have you ever made sourdough bread or tasted it? It's sour, right? Well, to make sourdough, you have to allow the organisms to ferment the carbohydrates. So basically, that's a bacterial waste product, lactic acid. And this is, in fact, what's happening in your mouth. So in essence, your mouth is like a sourdough starter. And every time you eat carbs, you're feeding bacteria to help it grow. In general, the concentration of bacteria at any given time is usually too low to cause permanent damage if you eat harder foods with fiber, and if you make normal saliva, and if you swallow. But not all bacteria lowers your pH. Streptococcus mitis actually increases the pH in your mouth. And so a balance of microbes is necessary for a healthy oral microbiome. Your saliva also buffers the teeth against acidic attacks because it not only provides water, but calcium and phosphate to remineralize the surface of the tooth caused by the acid. I think of a mouth as a petri dish more than a sourdough starter, but they, in fact, are both. And this is why your breath kind of smells after you wake up. It's literally a petri dish growing bacteria. And this is also why you should brush your teeth before you go to sleep, because you make less saliva at night. And make sure you floss if you have any food particles trapped in between your teeth. And bacteria, they grow really fast. They reproduce every 15 minutes. And remember, it's not only the simple sugars, but it's the refined carbohydrates that give people the most problems. It's almost like you're a catering company and feeding the party that's happening in your mouth. And in reality, no amount of fluoride is going to prevent your cavities if that's your diet. And the more acidic environment, the faster streptococcal mutans grow. Essentially, this is dysbiosis when you have a shift in the balance. Just like a petri dish, if you want bacteria to grow faster, give it more sugar. But we don't think of our mouth as a petri dish, but that's what we do every time we drink sugary water. So anyone who drinks sugar-sweetened beverages, eats sugar-sweetened desserts and meals are essentially rinsing their mouth with sugar water. Have you guys ever tried Chinese food like sweet and sour chicken? You know, that's actually worse than the sugar water because it also has saturated fat. Now, eating fatty foods with carbohydrate, especially simple sugar with saturated fat, is exactly what we are doing to give ourselves dental caries and metabolic diseases like obesity and diabetes. So just by drinking fluoridated tap water may help you a little bit with the dental caries, but I don't see how it's going to make a dent in obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. And those are the real drivers of healthcare costs, our food. So if you're an insurance company trying to get people to see their dentist once or twice a year to save 12%, you know, that's good, but good luck staying in business because the overall costs of medical bills are just skyrocketing with more chronic metabolic diseases. And so I think the discussion should be on improving people's diet qualities. And our nation would save billions of dollars and have less cavities if we address the root cause. Now, cavities have existed through history, just like obesity, but the massive scale at which people are developing both diseases can be traced back to the Industrial Revolution that allowed the world to produce massive amount of refined grains for storage. Processed foods are also more appealing because they're softer. And when you eat softer foods, it removes less plaque. And that's because there's no mechanical friction from chewing. Now, it is true an apple a day keeps the dentist away because an apple is hard. And as you chew it, it scrubs some of that food and plaque off your teeth. This doesn't happen with applesauce. So when you change your diet to a whole food, high fiber rich diet, you will notice that you will have less plaque, simply because you'll be eating less refined starches and simple sugars. And plus, the friction of that fiber will help reduce some of that plaque. But if you do it the wrong way and you become vegan or vegetarian and you're eating a bunch of refined carbohydrate, basically bakery items like breads, cookies, cakes, those things are filled with carbohydrates that your bacteria love. And as a child, I ate processed, tasty, soft, carbohydrate-rich fatty foods, and I had several cavities and a couple of root canals before I was 10 years old. And on top of that, I was overweight. And that's all despite the fact that I was drinking fluorinated tap water. Now, the main problem was also that I was a horrible toothbrusher and I fell asleep with like sugary bubblegum in my mouth. I don't know if you've ever tasted bubblegum, but I just love that scent. It was my favorite flavor of gum. And sure enough, my mom would occasionally buy me Bubblicious bubblegum, and that was made out of real sugar. It was so delicious that I fell asleep with the gum a couple of times and I woke up with bubblegum all over my face and my hair. That's actually really dangerous, as gum is a choking hazard. Now, to be fair, my parents, they didn't know I was laying down with gum in my mouth. And I thought that was just something kids did until I started seeing people chewing gum and falling asleep. So now if I ever see anybody chewing gum, I always remind them not to do it laying down. So parents, if you give your kids gum, make sure you check on them and remind your kids not to lay down with gum in their mouth. I used to love chewing gum and I chewed it almost every day throughout school. However, my gum chewing days are long gone because for a while I got really bad TMJ from all those decades of chewing gum. It was so bad that at one point I couldn't even eat my real food because it was too hard for me to chew. So for a while I was just blending my fiber-rich foods, and that's how I got used to eating some smoothies. Thank God I finally worked out all that difficulty with physical therapy and massages. And now I have no problems eating whole foods that are high in fiber. And since I've changed my diet and eat predominantly high fiber rich foods, I have definitely seen a reduction in tartar and plaque on my teeth. The quality of your food is especially important if you want to have a higher IQ. And we only think about IQ tests when we think of children, but IQ is important throughout our entire lives. Now, since the 1930s, the IQ of our nation overall has actually been trending up 5 points per decade until 2023. And the states with the lowest IQ scores, they tend to be in the South and the Southwest, including where I live in California. At first, I thought maybe this was a reflection of the state's school budget. But Colorado actually spends less money per pupil than most of these other states, and they scored higher on their IQ tests. So could the IQ discrepancy be from fluorinated tap water? Well, this map doesn't really show a correlation. The irony is that people forgot that there's more than one toxin in our water that can decrease our IQ. Take lead, for example. America has been working on removing lead from our water supply for decades. And overall, we've done a fairly good job except for Flint, Michigan. Apparently, the people in charge of their water system had no chemistry or biochemistry or physics background, and they didn't understand that if they put salt water through lead plumbing pipes, you actually corrode the pipes and then you leach the lead in the drinking water. And this is why all politicians should be required to take mandatory chemistry, biology, biochemistry, physics, and nutrition and health classes, especially if they're going to put laws and regulations in these fields. They make critical nutrition and health decisions for all of us. And so really, the higher IQ may be because we got rid of lead that contaminated our water system. And lead wasn't banned from new water line services until 1986. But 9 million water lines still exist carrying water to businesses and homes throughout the country that contain lead. And the problem with lead pipes was even present during the Roman Empire. In fact, Rome built their entire irrigation system on lead pipes. And a few years ago, I had the privilege of visiting the ancient city of Pompeii, and I noticed that their doors were really short. Apparently, their people had chronic lead poisoning because their water pipes were made out of 100% lead. And it's crazy. At one time, women used lead in their makeup, face powders, mascaras, pigments, and it was found in paint. This was in our lifetime. And if you wear makeup, it's super important to get one that's clean. Lead was also a form of birth control and used in common household plates, pitcher, pots, pans, and pewter cups. Even the Romans knew lead caused health problems, including madness and death. In fact, some of their problems were blamed on tomatoes because people served tomatoes on lead pewter plates. And the acid from tomatoes actually leached the lead out of the plate into the food. And people got severely sick from that. That's essentially food poisoning. And for a while, people didn't figure out that it was actually the lead and not the tomatoes that was poisonous. Now in California, I've noticed that a lot of crystals have stickers that they have lead. And this is why you should pay attention to those stickers and not serve any food in those crystals. And most people know to avoid high doses of lead. However, low daily exposure of lead can also lead to chronic lead poisoning. And this is the same with all toxins in our environment, including sugar. You remember getting lollipops from your doctor's visits? If all you did was suck on a lollipop once a day, there would be no way you would be overweight or have diabetes. You may get cavities, but you wouldn't be overweight or have diabetes. A lollipop typically has about 15 grams of added sugar, and most sweetened yogurts have actually more than that. But if you're eating sweetened yogurts, you're probably eating other foods that are sweet too. If you look at the ingredients in your breakfast, your pastry, your coffee blend, your midday snacks and desserts, and even your meals of added sugar. And by the end of the year, you're likely eating like 66 pounds of sugar and you didn't even know it. Chronic sugar poisoning causes cavities, weight gain, suppresses your immune system, and leads to other medical conditions. Now, in the US, our tap water usually doesn't cause acute fluoride poisoning because the doses are too low. But chronic exposure to fluoride has been shown to adversely affect the brain development of children outside of the country to cause lower IQs. And hence, many countries around the world, especially in Europe, have banned fluoride in their water supply. And whenever America has a debate on whether or not a chemical has an adverse health outcome, well, the first thing I do is to check on what Europe does. So I flew to Switzerland to test their water supply. Do you know what's in your bottled water? Is it as pure as Swiss bottled water? Now, I have here a bottle from Switzerland because I'm sitting in Zurich, Switzerland, and I have here a bottle I brought back from the airport. This is from California. And I'm going to test these bottled waters to see what's in it. So I have here a test strip card that I just ordered from Amazon. And I know this is kind of crude. It may not be good for lead. It doesn't test for arsenic. But I'm just curious to see what's the difference between our bottled water in America and Swiss bottled water. So I'm going to pour some water in a tube. I'm going to start with the Swiss water first. This was given to me by my hotel. And apparently this water is supposed to be from Swiss spring water, and it's been a tradition since the 1400s. Let me pour a little bit in. Okay. I Google translated the back because I couldn't read German, even though I took 3 years of German in high school. So these are my test strips. It tests for hardness, copper, iron, nitrates, nitrites, as well as chlorine, fluoride. So I'm going to put this in the Swiss bottled water. I'm supposed to let it sit there for a few minutes or a few seconds, I think. Oh, it's very interesting. It's fizzing. Isn't that interesting? I don't know if you guys can see it. All right, I'm going to take it out, line it up with the test strip, right? It is, hardness is not bad. It's 100 and I think it's probably closest to 120. It has no chlorine, has no iron, copper. It has, it's kind of yellowish. It's supposed to be a shade of pink, so I would assume it's negative. It can't detect any lead. These test strips are really unreliable for lead. Nitrates, negative. Nitrites, negative. MPS, I have to look what MPS is. I'm not quite sure what that is. Total chlorine, 0. Fluoride, it's a little purplish. I'm not quite sure. It doesn't quite match any of the colors. Bicarbonate, it has trace amounts, and the pH is a little bit more acidic, right? A little bit more like 6.0. So now I'm going to test the crystal geyser water that the airport gave me. Let's see. I'm going to pour some in. I'm going to stick a test strip in here as well. Let it sit there for a few seconds. This one isn't fizzing at all. I'm not quite sure what the fizzing action was from. Okay. And then now the crystal geyser water looks like this. zero iron. It's free of chlorine. It has no minerals. Nitrites and nitrates are negative. Chlorine, it's negative. Fluoride, I think it's similar to the other one. It's kind of hard to tell. It may be zero. Cyanuric acid is zero. Chlorine dioxide is zero. Alkalinity is zero. Bicarbonate, it may be somewhere between 0 and 40 because it's a little bit green, and the pH is slightly more acidic than the Swiss water. So I've also been traveling around Switzerland. We went to Lucerne and Interlaken, and now I'm in Zurich. So I got some bottled water from Lucerne. This is actually my filtered water bottle. I bring this everywhere I go when I travel because it has its own filter. So this way I make sure that I drink pure water. No matter where I'm at, I can drink hotel tap water. So I filled this up with Lucerne Hotel tap water, and I was going to pour some out and test this one too. All right, this is Lucerne Hotel tap water. Let it sit for a few seconds. This one didn't bubble either. Let me take this out. Okay, so this Lucerne Hotel tap water is less hard than the bottled mineral water, right? That's why they sell bottled mineral water, so that you have minerals in it. Crystal Geyser was 0. This is about 25. It's still free of chlorine, free of iron. Not really matching up with the copper, but I assume it's negative. And lead, it seems like it's negative. Nitrates, it looks negative. Nitrites looks negative. NPS, so look up what that is. Total chlorine is negative. Fluoride looks kind of negative. Cyanuric acid looks negative. Chlorine dioxide negative. Total alkalinity, it seems more alkaline. And then carbonate, it looks like it may have a little bit of carbonation or bicarbonate. And the pH seems acidic, seems yellow. Okay, now I'm going to go get some Zurich tap water. Okay, this is tap water from the Zurich hotel I'm in. And I'm just going to put it in. It seems like it fizzed up a little bit more than my other waters, but not like the mineral water that I was given. Oh, maybe it's a bubbly mineral water. Maybe that's why it fizzed so much. I have to try some. Okay, so Zurich tap water, I think it's a little bit harder, and it has no chlorine, no iron, no copper, lead, I think it's none. Nitrate is negative. Chlorine is still maybe negative to 0.5. Fluoride, I think it's probably negative. It's hard to tell. This is hard to read because it doesn't correlate. And that's the thing with these test strips. They're a little bit hard to read. Okay, and then chlorine dioxide, total alkalinity. It seems like it's a little bit more alkaline. Bicarbonate, it has a little bit more carbonation. And the pH looks like it's acidic, right? So let me try that water. Maybe this is like a sparkling water, and that's why it was so bubbly. Nope, not sparkling. I'm going to pour it again, see if it bubbles. Okay, I'm going to try this mineral water again because it was kind of weird. I stuck my test strip in and it started bubbling. Oh, I think it's doing it again. Yeah, you see how it's kind of all bubbled together? I don't know if you can see it, but there's definitely bubbles in here that wasn't in the other ones. See, look at the bubbles. So it did react with the reagent. So I put this one in longer, and this is the second time I've tested the mineral water, right? It's harder. It has 250 milligrams per liter of hardness. That means it has minerals. Chlorine, iron negative, copper negative, lead, not really reliable. Nitrates, nitrites, NPS, chlorine, fluoride, cyanuric acid, chlorine dioxide, alkalinity. It's like about probably around 40. And there's carbonation in here that's more than the other ones. And then the pH is a little bit higher. It's a little bit more alkaline compared to the other waters that I just tested.
Hi friends, I am so thrilled that you want to take charge of your health and take charge of your food. Now, I know nutrition can be complex, but it doesn't have to be. And I'm here to support you in this lifelong journey. So if you point your camera app to this QR code, it'll take you to a link for a free handout that I created just for you. And if you like it, if you want to see other handouts, please go to the link in my show notes, and then you can leave me your feedback on what I could do to help you in your journey. Okay, back to the video now.
And the Swiss, they had apparently drinkable fountains everywhere, but I chose not to directly drink in those fountains. And this is why I brought my own water filter. In America, I don't have that habit. So I generally try to filter any water that I drink. So this way I don't have to worry about the different solvents and solutes that contaminate the water. And I also didn't want to be collecting plastics in my body. So I went around the country testing different water fountains from Zurich to Lucerne into the mountains. And sure enough, no matter which fountain I tested, I didn't find any fluoride. In reality, fluoride is not just in our tap water. It's actually in your toothpaste. And if you grew up before the 1940s, you probably didn't really brush your teeth or use toothpaste. America has come a long way with dental hygiene, and now probably every household has some form of toothpaste. Now, toothpaste has 1,000 parts per million of fluoride. So between fluoride and fluorinated tap water, why is it that 9 out of 10 Americans still have cavities, right? Because it's our food. And if we never address the root cause of cavities, which is our diet, we're really never going to make progress. And, we seem to focus on the symptom instead of the root cause of our diet. And the amount of fluoride that you get in your system is dependent upon how much toothpaste you actually swallow. Now, people use supposedly a quarter teaspoon of toothpaste that contains 1.3 milligrams of fluoride. The maximum amount of fluoride a person could easily consume is 10 milligrams a day safely. So that's over 7.5 times of brushing your teeth. So unless you're swallowing that toothpaste per use, you're really not going to get 1.3 milligrams of fluoride if you spit it out. And I don't know too many people who would swallow their toothpaste, except for one medical school classmate's father, who's actually a pilot and a doctor. And a few times a year, he would volunteer for medical missionaries trips and fly into remote villages. And so to save time, he would brush his teeth in the cockpit and just swallow it. The thought of that is kind of nasty to me. The amount of fluoride that is in the tap water is less than 0.7 milligrams per liter. And at that level, even the National Toxicology Program recognizes that there is not much evidence to prove that our current tap water is lowering the IQ of children. And it hasn't found any evidence that support fluoride negatively affects the IQ of adults. Proponents of people who want to keep fluoride in the tap really only focuses IQ on academic intelligence, but there's another component of IQ, and that's emotional intelligence. And there's an epidemic of children who struggle with emotional intelligence, and there appears to be a link of high fluoride exposures in pregnant women during the 3rd trimester to elevate their risk of having an offspring that has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So fluoride does appear to affect developing fetuses. But before you throw away your toothpaste and spit out your tap water, remember, association does not mean causation. Besides, let's talk about all the other ways you can get fluoride from common foods and how fluoride really affects your health. Now, if you're a tea drinker, just know that depending on the tea and where it's grown, your cup of tea can have 0.3 to 6.5 milligrams per liter fluoride made from distilled water. So that's 100% from your tea leaves. And coffee can have 22 milligrams per cup. And this is using pure water without any fluoride. And for reference, a glass of bottled water with added fluoride has less than 0.17 milligrams per serving. Now, shrimp can have 0.17 milligrams per serving. A 3-ounce side of beef can have 0.02 milligrams per serving. And if you're a vegetarian, just know that half a cup of cooked oatmeal can have 0.08 milligrams per serving. A baked potato has about the same amount. So it doesn't really matter what kind of diet you have. You will be exposed to some level of fluoride in your food if you eat whole food. And this is because fluoride is a naturally occurring ion in the form of the element fluorine. Now, if you remember your periodic table, fluorine is in the same category as the element chlorine. They're called halogens, and they're under the group number 17 on the periodic table. Some of these halogens, like chloride, bromine, and iodine, are actually essential for human life. Fluoride is not essential for human life. Theoretically, if you don't eat any carbohydrates, sugar, and dairy, then you don't cultivate as many harmful microbes and you may not have cavities. But if you're going to eat those kind of foods, then it would be useful to do something to prevent getting cavities, like brushing your teeth. So the question is, how many people actually brush their teeth? after they eat carbohydrate or sweet foods. And this is a problem. Few Americans brush their teeth before the 20th century, and we brush our teeth a little bit more, but maybe not in the right times. And this is why our nation had a dental crisis. And just like fortifying vitamins and minerals to processed grains and cereals, the American government decided to step in and add fluoride in the water so that people didn't have to learn to adopt some better lifestyle, including avoiding those things that cause cavities and taking care of their teeth on a daily basis. But during that time, we did go from a nation essentially almost no toothbrushing to a nation of predominantly toothbrushers, but now we're all obese. And when you brush your teeth, I really don't know anybody who doesn't use toothpaste. And I'm sure you have at least one toothpaste in your house. But before the 20th century, nobody owned toothpaste, even though it was actually invented in the 1800s by a dentist that mixed soap with dental paste. Now, I wouldn't put soap because that's a gut microbiome emulsifier. I'm sure you've heard of Colgate. They mass-produced the first toothpaste in a jar in 1870. But it was Pepsodent that figured out how to make toothpaste a household name by giving people a reward to motivate them to brush their teeth. It's called sodium lauryl sulfate. By adding sodium lauryl sulfate, it actually caused a tingling sensation in their mouth. And that gave people the impression that their mouth is clean. And Americans, they just love that feeling. But that feeling is caused by an irritant, sodium lauryl sulfate. And I found out the hard way that that irritant was irritating my mouth too. Literally, my mouth would always feel raw, and it got worse every time I would brush my teeth. It got to the point that it was so bad I was afraid to drink water. And I didn't realize it was my toothpaste until I stopped using it. And then all of a sudden, my mouth started feeling normal. So I personally do not use any toothpaste with sodium lauryl sulfate. Now, there are numerous published studies in which fluoride has been proven to reduce dental caries. And most people, they think of dental caries as being cosmetic, but not this infectious disease physician. When I see dental caries, I think it reflects your overall health. And could you have a dental abscess under those caries? Maybe a facial infection, maybe a systemic abscess, including heart valve infections like endocarditis. Because the same process that causes cavities, gum disease like gingivitis, causes systemic diseases like heart valve infections and pneumonia. Basically, poor oral hygiene is a window to your metabolic and immune health because the exact root causes that disturb your oral microbiome to cause inflammation in your mouth will cause inflammation in the rest of your body. Now, endocarditis means inflammation of the inside of your heart on your heart valves. And if you have endocarditis, you basically have a nest of germs stuck on your heart valve. We call this a vegetation. It's kind of like a beehive or a wasp hive on a branch, and this sways with the wind. Vegetations sway with your blood flow. And if that vegetation isn't anchored on your heart valve securely, then it can break off and flick to another part of your body. If it flicks to your brain, you get an embolic stroke. If it flicks to your kidneys, you get a kidney abscess. It can flick to your spleen, your liver. Basically, any organ that gets a dose of this vegetation will then develop an abscess and a stroke as well. And when you get a stroke, you're basically stopping blood flow. And then that blood vessel could potentially bleed. And usually people with endocarditis, they get super sick super fast. Unfortunately, sometimes the infection is so aggressive that it overwhelms the host. You know, just like termites on your wood beam, if a vegetation is on your heart valve, it can eat up your heart valve, which is important to blood flow as well as preventing heart failure. Now, these are some of the worst case scenarios that I treat from poor oral hygiene. But the first stage of that is gingivitis or a cavity. And some people may just have fever. When a pediatrician sees your child for fever, they're used to seeing children with colds and coughs. And so when I examine people, I look for clues. What's the worst case scenario? What else can you have that is causing your fever? And sometimes for endocarditis, they actually have fingernail splinters. And most of the time, fingernail splinters are caused by local trauma unless it's present close to the base of the nail bed. An ophthalmologist can see Roth spots or cotton wool spots in the retina. And these are a form of splinter hemorrhages in the retina. And people can also get an immune reaction in their hands and soles, and that can present as red bumps. So do you see how systemic diseases can cause local signs and vice versa? And when you ingest excessive fluoride, there's no debate that it causes a condition called fluorosis in children, which we focus on the teeth, but it can also affect the bones. And this is common in areas in which there's high fluoride levels in the water. And usually this is around volcanic activity where people are dependent on that groundwater source. So countries like India, China, the Middle East, and Latin America, they all have areas that are prone to have high fluoride levels in their groundwater. Now in the US, we pretty much control amongst all the 50 states how much fluoride we put in our drinking water. But here are some of the utilities with the highest amount of fluoride as tested by the Environmental Working Group in the US. Now, fluorosis generally affects kids below 8, in which fluoride can stain the enamel, leading to white streaks or brown spots. And this is really a cosmetic issue. Now, if it gets to the skeleton, this is a result of prolonged exposure to really high fluoride levels over several years or decades. And if you get that high of an amount, you can get joint pain and stiffness, and in severe cases, it potentially can cause skeletal deformities. Now, dental fluorosis is relatively common in areas where fluoride is added to the water supply. And most cases are mild and often go unnoticed. Now, skeletal fluorosis is pretty rare in developed countries as fluoride levels are highly regulated. Now, fluoridinosis is also an occupational hazard, especially for people who work in the aluminum industry, where they may be exposed to fluoride dust or gases. Now, here are some fluoride intake thresholds. And typically for skeletal fluorosis, you have to be ingesting 4 milligrams per liter over a prolonged period of time. But I think overall, you can understand why people have mixed feelings about fluoride. There are plenty of negative issues with this medicine. It is a medicine because it's not a nutrient. It has no biological activity essential for our health. And putting medicine in our water may be an effective treatment to prevent cavities, but cavities are really a symptom, not a cause of systemic health problems. So fluoride is a Band-Aid that enables people to continue with poor dietary choices. So we're not actually addressing the root cause, which is diet quality. Now, the world currently has data that fluoride can affect the central nervous system and brain development in fetuses and children. And do we want to really wait for our own data to prove them wrong? And people are ignoring this fluoride data, like just how people ignored the health effects of lead. And I'm not so sure we should be adding medicine in our water supply. Now, if people want fluoride, it's still available in toothpaste. I think the use of toothpaste in terms of cavity prevention is more effective than drinking fluorinated water, right? Because you're actually brushing your teeth. So personally, I've been filtering fluoride, lead, plastics, as well as other toxins out of my water because I believe having pure drinking water is critical for health. For myself, I bought clearly filtered water because I hate being dehydrated or paying those astronomical prices for bottled plastic water. And how this works is it has a screw top and a water filter connected. So then this whole thing is replaceable. You can buy these cartridges, right? It screws off through a tube where then you suck. Okay. So this is what I use when I travel, and each cartridge is good for about 3 months of drinking water. But I looked up some other drinking waters in common stores like Target and Walmart. So let me go over which brands filter fluoride. So at Target, I really only found one brand that filtered fluoride, and that's Zero Water. That's made by Halogens. So that filters out fluoride in your drinking water. Now at Walmart, they had more brands. They also sold Halogens Zero Water. They also had Enroslu. That also filters out fluoride. They had Aquacrust by Berkey. That filters out fluoride. And of course, they had different kinds of Berkey water filters as well. And not all water filters filter out fluoride. You know, the refrigerator water filter, that usually doesn't filter any fluoride. And this is because fluoride is an anion. Most filters filter out cations like lead, calcium. Those are positively charged cations. But fluoride is a negatively charged particle. So usually water filters don't filter fluoride because of the charge difference. And so this is why when you go shopping for a water filter, make sure you read on the label exactly what it filters out, because you may be surprised if you're looking for it to filter out other substances, then it may not all do that. So not all water filters are equal. Now, if you have a house and you can put in a reverse osmosis system, well, that definitely filters out fluoride. So in my house, I have a reverse osmosis system that's connected to my refrigerator so that I'm not dependent on the refrigerator to filter out my fluoride. Now, I've mentioned several water filters. Just so that you know, I don't have any financial ties with any of the water filtering companies. I just looked up the data for you. And I personally travel with a water filter bottle because I can't stand paying astronomical rates for plastic bottled water. And on top of that, I always feel dehydrated, and I never want to get dehydrated because that by itself can cause a whole host of other problems. But hydration is much more than just drinking filtered water. If you want to learn more about that, watch the next video.